How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Homestead. Today's going to be a good day. I could just feel it. So I woke up and it was 34 degrees outside today. I can't believe it, but we already had our first frost. The weather guessers were saying we were going to get down to 29 degrees last week, but that, of course, never happened. So it being 34 degrees this morning, that's pretty cool. I am very happy to see the frost, but that means we got to be prepping for winter. Even though we're only in September right now, we're not even into October. It's nowhere near winter time officially. We get our first snow about middle to end of October usually. And we got a massive snowfall last year. I looked it up. October 23rd, we got, I think it was about 8 to 9 inches of snow within a day and a half. So it can happen and it could just hit like that. So I don't want to wait because that snow did last quite a while. It didn't last all the way into like the dead of winter. But if I was to wait to get my winter prepping done until, say, end of October, last week of October, I would have been doing it in snow boots. I would have been doing it in the snow. So I don't want to do that. I want to do it while it's nice, bright, and sunny out because right now it's about mid-50s. It's a beautiful day out, clear blue skies. Let's get to work. It kind of goes without saying, but the number one consideration you need to make when prepping for winter compared to any other time of the year is what you use to heat your house with. If you use propane, do you have a contract with someone? Are they going to be coming out every month, every 2 months, every 3 months to fill up your cylinder? Do you know your usage rate in the winter so they're not going to find you a popsicle inside your icebox house when they come to fill up your empty tank? Are you prepaid? Do you need to prepay? Etc., etc. All those things need to be taken into account before you can figure out whether your house is going to be warm this winter. Now for myself, I heat with wood. So the consideration for me is whether I have enough wood cut, chopped, and dried, that's an important component, to last throughout the entire winter. Now I mentioned the drying component because I have a new EPA wood stove which needs a max moisture content of around 8 to 10%. Anything more than that and the catalytic converters aren't going to work properly. Now this is the leftovers of 2 cords that I bought last year, unfortunately, but I had to have my wood stove installed the last week of January out of an emergency necessity because my propane furnace went out. So I had to buy this wood despite the fact that I cut down more than enough trees last year. I just didn't have it all processed and ready to burn. So I had to buy this and it has been seasoning an extra year, which means even though it was dry last year, it's going to be even drier. I also bought another 2 cords last year just to be on the safe side, just in case we had a worse second half of winter than we did the first half. Thankfully, it wasn't that bad. And this is the leftover, like I said, of that first 2 cords. It's roughly a half cord, which means we have about 2.5 cords of more than dry enough split and cut wood ready to burn. Now, some of these pieces are a little bit too large in my opinion. I like pieces that are about this size here, if you can see that, where it has a decent enough surface area, but I'm able to put a couple logs in there rather than just one big log. I find the bigger logs, they more smolder than burn. Some people like that for an all-night burn. I just don't find them to burn all that well. Maybe they're not dry enough, but I've taken some different test samples from around this stack and they're measuring anywhere from 5 to 7% moisture. And I actually have my moisture meter on me, which I recommend you get if you have a new EPA wood stove. And right now it's reading 0% moisture, obviously. You just take the little prongs there, you take a piece of wood, we'll say this one, jam it in. We are reading right at 5% moisture content. And for those of you curious, this is not the proper way to take a moisture reading, not the official scientific way, I should say. If you want to get a more proper reading, what you should do is split the log in question and take the reading from the dead center of the split portion, which in theory should be the wettest portion of the log, instead of the outside, which is in theory the driest portion of the log. but 5% is right there within the 5 to 7% range that I was talking about when I was splitting the logs and testing the center of them. I wanted to mention that before I got any comments about it. But that being said, it's pretty obvious. If I burned through 1.5 cords for the last half of last winter, that means I should probably stack a full 3 cords if I want to last the entire winter. And 2.5 cords is not 3 cords. So what's going on there? Well, that's only the wood that I bought. That's not counting the wood that I cut myself. And I know for a fact that I have at least 6 cords of wood on the property right now. Now that's not to say that they are all dry. That's not all dry cords. But I do have 6 cords of wood on property. Some of them are dry enough. I would say I have roughly 3.5 cords that are more than dry enough to burn, that are below that 8 to 10% moisture content. So we're good to go. The other wood, if we do just have one of those really harsh winters that's just out of the blue, one of the historic winters basically, I will burn the wood that's not quite ready, because you have to. You have to do what you need to survive, and the stove will survive. The stove will do just fine. I'll just get a chimney sweep out first thing in the spring, make sure it's all cleaned out, and we'll be good to go. So I wanted to mention that. Make sure you have enough firewood. Make sure your propane is topped off. If you are heating with something else, make sure you are good to go with that. But yeah, make sure your heat source is secured for the wintertime. And in case anyone is suspicious of me having over 6 cords of wood on property and only showing you that little bit, this is just one of the piles that I have, and it has roughly 3 cords in it. Once again, this is not all dried and ready to burn, but if need be, it can be burned. Besides worrying about how we're going to heat our house, what are some other things we should be prepping for going into winter? Well, if you live in an area like I do and power outages are just an inevitability, one of which is basically guaranteed to be over 24 hours in length, you better make sure you have enough fuel on hand for your generator. Now, in my case, this is not all the fuel that I stock. This is just what I currently have because I'm constantly rotating through my fuel supply. I'm always adding it to my quad, my chainsaws, whatever the case may be. And if there's a canister, if there's some fuel that's getting a little bit too old and I don't want to run it in my chainsaws, I'll put it in my car rather than let it go bad. Because there's no reason why you should let it go bad. Always cycle through your fuel. And the other thing is, how do you know if it's going bad or not? Label your fuel cans, people. Put a little note as to when you filled them up so you know, is this gas good? Is it going to go bad? Is it already bad? And on top of that, you may not be able to see it from there, add fuel stabilizer. Fuel stabilizer is not only going to extend the life a couple months, but possibly a couple years if you need to use it in emergency situations like that, and you're not cycling through it like I'm telling you you should be doing. So label it, add fuel stabilizer, and always get ethanol-free premium. It doesn't matter if you don't have small engines like chainsaws or quads to run it in. Always get ethanol-free premium because ethanol attracts water out of the air. It attracts moisture out of the air, which means you're going to get a whole bunch of water in your fuel if you're keeping it for extended periods of time. Water not burning the same way as gas, you're going to have some problems if you're expecting to use it like normal fuel. So ethanol-free premium all but eliminates that. It's not going to completely eliminate that, but if you're cycling through your fuel, if you're using it regularly, if you add fuel stabilizer and you get ethanol-free premium, you're probably not going to have an issue with moisture in your fuel. Another note on fuel, you might notice this CS labeled gas can over there. That is my chainsaw gas. If you're like me and there's a good chance that you're going to have to run at least one of your saws during the wintertime, don't winterize your saws and make sure you have chainsaw gas on hand. But if you don't run your saws during the winter, if you're just the average homeowner, make sure you winterize your equipment the same way you would a lawnmower or a weed eater. And on top of that, if you have chainsaw gas or two-stroke gas, whatever you want to call it, make sure you use it up before the end of the season. Chainsaws and two-stroke machines in general are ultra susceptible to bad fuel, which means you only want to keep it in there for about 2, 3, 4 months max. If I need to fill this guy up, I'm taking it directly to the gas station. I'm not filling it up with this stuff here because I want to make sure that what's getting inside it is the freshest fuel possible. And the reason you want to make sure this is empty before going into winter, if you don't plan on running your saws, is because come springtime, you might forget that that was bad gas that's in there from the year before. You also don't want to just let the gas go to waste. You might as well use it. So just make sure that you're using your chainsaw gas if you don't intend to run your saws during the wintertime. Above the gas cans, you can see that I have about 6 gallons of kerosene and a whole bunch of these smaller propane canisters. Now you can get adapters that would allow you to use the larger like grill size propane tanks rather than these smaller guys for pretty much anything you would want to. Like the little Mr. Buddy heater, for example, you could get the adapters for them. But I just prefer these smaller guys because then I get to shoot them at the end of the day. What's more fun than that? You can also get adapters to refill these from the larger tanks if that's something that interests you as well. I would just rather have them all on hand and then shoot the empty ones. That's just me. And I stock all the kerosene because I use oil lamps as my alternative lighting source if the power goes out. And then if I run out of kerosene, which I don't think I would run out of kerosene, but if I do, I have a crap load of tea light candles stashed everywhere throughout my house. Open up a drawer somewhere and you're almost guaranteed you're going to find a tea light candle inside that drawer. So kerosene as a secondary light source, and then tea light after that. 1 is none, 2 is 1, 3 is better. Make sure you have a way to heat your house. Make sure you have a secondary way of doing it. Make sure you have a third way of doing it if all else fails. Same goes with light. Same goes with everything else you should consider when it comes to prepping. If you're a fellow homesteader, a big consideration going into winter should be if you have enough feed on hand for your animals. I don't want any of my subscribers, anyone watching this video, to lose an animal because they don't have enough feed on hand. Guys, do not trust the supply chain right now. Don't let your feeder run empty and then expect that you could go to the store and just get a bag of feed. Please don't do that. Please don't risk the lives of your animals, especially in winter when supply chains get even tighter, when shipping gets even harder, when everything about the whole logistics issue can go awry that much easier. Please make sure you have enough feed on hand, people. So what I do for my chicken feed is I get Woods. This is a local feed to me. I recommend you get a feed that's local to you if at all possible. And if you're in the North Idaho area, this is made out of Ponderay. It is non-GMO, like you can see at the top, and it is, from what I've heard, it is all organic, but they haven't gotten the full approval yet because it's a whole long process and yada, yada, yada. But they are in the process of getting it, and they do have some other feeds that are certified organic, so I wouldn't be surprised if it is genuinely USDA organic, just doesn't have the certification yet. They're not paying me anything. I just wanted to mention that this is the feed that I use for those of you curious. And then I mix it in these large trash cans here. Open up the feed bag. And then, don't want that going into the feed. Dump it in. And then I also add, going into winter, I add some in general, but I just add a little extra going into winter. Some oyster shells, excuse me. Eggshells if I don't have oyster shells, but thankfully I have oyster shells now. There was a shortage for a while, like everything else, go figure. And I just add about, this is about 5 pounds, about 5 pounds per 50 pounds of feed. That's kind of the way I mix it. Dump it in, and just go to mixing. There's no good way of doing this, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to make sure it's all incorporated and done right. All the feed's mixed, we're good to go. And that's how the feed looks when it's all mixed up. You can see the little oyster shells in there. It's a really nice feed. The chickens honestly love this stuff. So I can even spread this out as scratch if I want to, and they'll just eat it up as if it's a treat. And since we're already on the topic of making sure our animals are well taken care of this winter, now's the perfect time to make sure that you have more than enough bedding to last throughout the winter. Whether you have chickens, goats, horses, cows, whatever your animals may be, make sure you have more than enough of their bedding on hand to last through the winter and then a little bit of extra more. Just like feed, just like firewood, you want to have a little bit extra just in case it's an extra bad winter, if there's a supply chain issue, whatever the case may be, just make sure you're ready for it. This one isn't fun, but it needs to be talked about and it has to get done before winter. Emptying the trash trailer. Let's do it. Yes, this is disgusting. No, this is not fun at all. Yes, I'm wearing girly yellow gloves because this is disgusting. I'll tell you what, while it was bad and it wasn't fun at all, it'd be a lot worse if it was covered with snow. So if you have to haul your trash to the dump like I do, if you don't get your trash picked up, make sure you do it before it's covered with snow because that just makes it a lot tougher for you. Trust me, I have experience with that one. One thing most people don't store enough of, including preppers, is water. And that's going into winter when it becomes harder than ever to access, being as most water sources are going to be frozen over. Well, you could just go out and melt some snow, right? You got a bunch of that. That's no big deal. Not necessarily condescending YouTube commenter, because snow is mostly air. Not only that, but sometimes the snow will all melt away right before a massive windstorm, which then kills the power when I need the water. So I need to keep some inside my house to make sure I'm not leaving it up to chance. And that's why I have a bunch of these 5-gallon containers, which, yes, this one is labeled kerosene, but I almost bet it'll hold water just as well as kerosene. And I have 3 of these in each of my bathrooms, as well as a couple stashed behind the island here in my kitchen for a total of 50 gallons. Now, this isn't my drinking water. I have my drinking water separate. I buy the little 1-gallon jugs straight from the store because that stuff has been completely filtered. There's nothing in it to go bad or go nasty. Whereas this stuff, because I fill it up from my tap, there's a chance, albeit a small one, that over the course of a year or so's time, the water inside here could start to go bad. Now, I do have tablets and filters to make sure that I can filter it if I do need to drink this water, so it's not going to be totally nasty, but I would prefer to just drink the stuff that doesn't have anything in it and I know is going to be okay for me to drink. So these 50 gallons are mainly for washing my hands, washing the dishes, flushing the toilet, doing that sort of stuff. And a note on flushing the toilet. If you do have to flush your toilet using jugs of water like this, you should add a big rock or a brick, something to the reservoir on the top of your toilet. The idea behind that comes from the California drought where you want to conserve water. Because you're taking up some volume in that reservoir, you don't have to fill it up as much, but in theory at least, depending on how big of a rock or brick you put in there and take up water space, it should flush the toilet just as well as it would if the brick wasn't there. So just a little note, I would definitely recommend you do that. Honestly, if you have a toilet that isn't a low flow toilet or one that uses 5 to 7 gallons ordinarily, my toilet uses 5 gallons every flush. You should probably just add a brick or a rock in there in general. Just be good for the environment. Come on, people. So we're out in the pump house, and this might be something a lot of you guys find interesting. The only thing that's on grid about my property is my electricity. So that means my water comes from my well. I'm not on any sort of city water, county water, nothing like that. I don't think county water is a thing. But I get my water from my well, which is about 160 some odd feet below me. The water gets pumped up and then fills up a water bladder inside this insulated box right here. The water bladder fills up and is pressurized and then sends the water up to the house. Now, I don't remember the exact size of the bladder, but looking inside here, it looks like it's somewhere over 50 gallons. So that's another source of water storage for me. I also use that to flush the toilets as well as take a shower. Typically, the first thing I do once the power goes out, take a shower. Unless there's anything major I have to do immediately, go take a warm, hot shower while that hot water heater is still warm, and then allow the bladder to refill the hot water heater. And because that hot water heater is so hot, it'll typically stay warm for quite a while. So if you have stuff you need to do with hot water besides take a hot shower, you could still do it after you're done. So that's another tip right there. You could use the bladder to store water as well as your hot water heater, but I just like taking a hot shower, especially since it's always cold when the power goes out, so it works out perfect. But that bladder fills up and then sends the water up to the house, like I said, and all that stuff is below the frost line besides the bladder and a couple of the other pipes that are inside here. So because of that, that bladder can obviously freeze if the temperature gets below a steady 32 degrees. If it's warmer than that, even if it's about like 35 degrees, if the temperature averages about 35 degrees in the afternoon, which, man, that's a really warm day, right? That will still stay totally thawed out, will be good to go because of the water flow going through it. But once it hits a steady 32 degree day average, obviously eventually this is going to cool off, and that's when we start to freeze. So what we need to do is plug in the heat lamps. The heat lamps, what? That's right. Because we are in an exterior outbuilding, and we have this little crappy old ass insulation in here, and then we have this little insulated box. That's it. It's an outbuilding. It doesn't have any heat source. We need to have some heat lamps inside here. So I have 2 heat lamps just like, right here. These guys right here, the stuff you would use inside your chicken coop, or the stuff I use in my chicken coop. Just standard heat lamps. Put them inside there, turn them on. We're good to go. Let me kick them on and I'll show you that. So that's how it looks inside here, but I will say I'm going to go and plug this light after I'm done filming because we're nowhere near a solid 32 degree day yet. But that's how it would look. If it gets really cold, like if we're going to have a blizzard or a winter storm warning or something, I would just add another light somewhere off of that pipe there. And that's enough to make sure stuff doesn't completely freeze. If need be, I'll keep one of the faucets on at a trickle, and that would be enough. But, this is usually how it goes, just with the one light, and that's enough to keep it all thawed out. Look at these silly birds sharing that log. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I was editing together the footage that we've taken so far on my lunch break, and come to find out that we're nearly at a half hour's worth of footage just with this one video. Which means we're going to have to split this into 2 parts. We're going to have to make this a multi-part video. So in the next video, next week, we're going to be finishing off the rest of the winter prepping that we need to get done, as well as reviewing the Hisun Tactics 550 ATV that I have. I got it last spring, so I've had it for about 1.5 years at this point. We're going to do a full review on it, just like I promised, but that's part of the winter prepping because that's my snowplow, so we have to include that in that video. So if you want to see that, please subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and share it with someone that you think also might enjoy it. YouTube doesn't really share my content around, so I have to rely on you guys, and I would really appreciate it if you would do so. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below in the comments. And with that, you guys, thank you for watching. Think for yourself, shoot straight, and I will see you next time.